Charlotte Works is the workforce development board serving Mecklenburg County and your source for the latest labor market news. What's the state of the labor force in Mecklenburg County? And what's going to happen 10 years from now? So in a previous video, we shared this update about the Mecklenburg County labor force. And we really wanted to emphasize that while we've seen an increase in the overall labor force since the pandemic started, because of the rise of remote work, we actually see a contraction in the availability of talent for local occupations. And so you can see on the screen again that 26% decrease pre-pandemic. We had about 560,000 individuals that were going to work in person in Mecklenburg County. And today that's closer to 414,000. So again, that contraction for those companies that are looking to hire for local in-person activities to really understand how we could see an increased labor force, but also hear from companies that they're experiencing a talent shortage. And so today what I wanted to talk about was look at the labor force in more detail, set the stage for what does Mecklenburg County's labor force look like, again, in more detail, look at that on a specific basis to understand what does talent supply look like for companies, and then to end with what is that going to look like 10 years from now? What are those key occupations and shifts and trends that we can project happening in 2031? And so again, just starting with the overview of the labor force in Mecklenburg County, you can see again, we have a population just over 1 million in Mecklenburg County. Over 800,000 people are employed with an average median household income of just under 70,000. And here you can see this is the breakdown of the population versus the labor force. So while we've got a population of just over 1 million, that labor force here right around 650,000. We've got a number of people that are 16 and up that aren't in the labor force today. And looking at the educational breakdown, again, above the national average, 30% of Mecklenburg County residents have a bachelor's degree, and then 15% have a graduate degree or higher. And you can see that is the bachelor's degree is 9.8% above the national average. And if we look at unemployment by demographics here, we can see the breakdown by age. Really what I want to zoom into here is some of the breakdown of our demographics in terms of the age of our population. So you can see Mecklenburg County, again, is above the national average here in terms of millennials. So for our younger workers, Mecklenburg County continues to be a hub for that millennial talent. In terms of retirement, so again, there's a whole host of research out about the graying workforce and the rise in boomers that will be retiring soon and how that's going to impact the workforce. And while that is definitely a national trend with specific industries and companies locally that need to be concerned about that, you can see we are below the national average pretty significantly for those individuals that will be retiring soon. So you can see the retirement risk is low here locally because we have a younger workforce than what we see as a national average. Again, above average racial diversity in Mecklenburg County. Slightly below the national average for veterans. And you can see here, if you look at the place of work versus place of residence map, where we've got net commuters going to work and where we've got talent coming from. So you can see the top zip code for people to go to work in Mecklenburg County is Uptown Charlotte, 28202. And that is definitely an importer of talent where we see a lot of individuals from 28105 are leaving their zip code to go to work. So you can kind of see again that crescent and wedge map here for that net commuter map in Charlotte, where the surrounding crescent on the outer part of Mecklenburg County is commuting to that lower wedge, Uptown, South Park, the Ballantyne area, where lots of individuals are going for their place of work. And again, looking at the migration patterns to Mecklenburg County, we can see a lot of migration coming from within the region. And the one notable exception to that is the Chicago area, Cook County. So we're seeing them as a leading importer of talent to the Charlotte area. And again, just a breakdown of some of our top jobs by industry. Again, we know we're a finance hub. We know we have strong professional, scientific, and technical service here above the national average as well. Strong transportation jobs above the national average. And if you just look at some of the top companies here locally, you can see Wells Fargo, Bank of America. So those are some of the top companies here in Charlotte. And we'll go ahead and just look at the educational pipeline. You can see a lot of graduates coming, obviously, from the local university, Charlotte. And looking at the in-demand skills, we can see marketing, agile methodology, finance. Again, we'll look at this in more detail in some of our skills-based career pathway videos. But today, what I wanted to really focus more on is that talent supply. So again, going back to the top, you can see we've got a population of over 1 million, but if you look at that labor force, you see that's only around 650,000 here in Mecklenburg County. And we just talked about what that looked like with the rise of remote workers, but another layer we wanted to add on to that to help explain and to help companies understand this talent shortage is what does the labor supply look like by wage? And so this next graph really tells you what does your labor supply as an employer look like if you're paying $15 an hour. And so at $15 an hour, you really only have 20% of the entire workforce to draw from. And so this graph shows where workers are based on the average salaries for Mecklenburg County. And so if you're paying a wage of $15 an hour, you're only going to be able to draw from 20% of that available labor force. Over 80% is going to expect a higher salary. They're going to have the skills and qualifications to really demand more, to seek those occupations that are a better fit for them. And so that's the other layer that we wanted to emphasize here, which is a lot of occupations that are struggling to hire have the in-person work requirements, which we already saw the contraction with remote work, with a number of individuals preferring remote work over in-person work. That reduced the labor force by 26% since the pandemic. And then again, if you're paying the wage around $15 an hour, you don't even have that entire $414,000 to draw from. You're looking at about 153,000 individuals that are right at or below that wage. So that's really the more appropriate reference point for employers paying this type of a wage, is to understand that at $15 an hour, you're really only going to be drawing 20% of the available workforce, and that sweet spot to draw about 50%, you see it's right between $20 and $25 an hour is right where we go from 41% of all workers to 55% of all workers. So you want to draw about half of that labor force. That's the number that you're looking at. And then again, 90% is under $60 an hour. So again, just another way to think about the available labor force for companies to think about what does our wage look like, and then how much talent will we realistically be able to attract at this wage point. And so again, you can see some of the top jobs that you might be able to attract for this $15 an hour wage. You can see workers making less than $15 an hour in a cashier role, or just under $10,000. Same for retail salesperson, fast food and counter workers, around 7,000 individuals. So again, like I said, another way to think about what does your available talent supply look like is to understand that wage cut, to see that if you're paying a lower wage, you're not drawing from that entire talent pool of workers. And it seems quite intuitive, but it helps to put it in this context to understand that we're not talking about 600,000. We're not talking about 400,000. We're talking about a total of 153,000 as just potential workers. And the next thing I really wanted to talk about today is, what is this going to look like 10 years from now? So 10 years from now, what are those occupational trends going to look like in Mecklenburg County? So if you're a job seeker looking today to say, what should I be going to school for? What should I be planning to do to make sure that I'm in the best position to succeed in the economy 10 years from now? And while obviously there's a lot of variability, and I'm sure there are many jobs that we don't know about today that will be on this list, from what we understand today, these are the projections that we can make for 10 years from now. And so here you can see these are some of the top occupations we expect to be in Mecklenburg County 10 years from now. You see, we still have a high demand for laborers, stockers, and material movers, customer service representatives. That is going to go down slightly. So you can see that's one that will actually shrink, but it's still strong demand 10 years from now. Registered nurses, that demand is going to, again, significantly increase. Still going to be strong demand 10 years from now. Retail salespersons is going to stay about the same, but still strong demand. Software developers is expected to see a significant increase over 40% here in Mecklenburg County over the course of the next 10 years. So that's one job that's going to continue to increase in demand here locally. At general operations managers, again, over a 40% increase expected over the next 10 years. Stockers and order fillers, over a 25% increase expected over the next 10 years. Cashiers are expected to contract there about 13%, but still a lot of occupations. And so the last thing that I really wanted to talk about within the context of what are we expecting 10 years from now is this column over on the far right-hand side, this automation index. So this is another way to think about what are these jobs going to look like in the future. And so the automation index, the average risk for automation is right about 100. So if you see a number over 100, that means that's an occupation that has a higher than average risk for automation. And if you see a number under 100, that means that occupation has a lower than average risk for automation. So when we're looking at that, when we look at laborers and material movers, that index of 117 means that while that's expected to be one of the top jobs in 2031, it does have an above average risk for automation. So that is one thing that could come into that industry to allocate those resources not to necessarily individuals, but to capital investments in automation. Whereas when we look at customer service representatives, registered nurses, even retail and software developers, those are all below 100, so below average risk for automation for those occupations. And again, software developers especially down at 80, and general and operations managers down at 82. So those are much lower risk for automation. And conversely, if we look at down here, waiters and waitresses, while we're expected to see strong growth over the next 10 years, that does have an automation index of almost 130. So again, that's something that could really shift these projected trends where automation could come in and disrupt the projections for 10 years from now. And so that's all I have for you today, but I hope you enjoyed this quick update on the state of the workforce in Mecklenburg County. For more information or for assistance as a business or a job seeker, visit charlotteworks.com.